Have you ever stopped and wondered, is this cold, this headache, this feeling of being run down, is it just a physical thing? Or is your mind, your stress, playing a part in it too? It's a huge question, one that people have been wrestling with for centuries, and today we're going to try and unravel that very mystery.
So let's just dive right in with the big one. Is being sick purely a physical problem? You know, like a car with a broken part? Or is there something more going on under the hood? Honestly, this single question is the key to understanding a massive shift in how we think about our own health.
All right, to really get where we're going, we first have to understand where we've been. And believe me, our idea of what makes us sick hasn't been some straight, logical line of progress. It's actually swung back and forth like a giant pendulum over thousands of years.
Way back in the Stone Age, the mind and body were seen as one and the same. If you got sick, well, an evil spirit must have taken up residence in your body. Fast forward to ancient Greece, and things get a little more biological. They thought it was all about an imbalance of the four humors, bodily fluids, but they still tied those humors to your personality and your mind. Then, whoosh, the pendulum swings way over to the supernatural in the Middle Ages. Sickness became seen as a punishment from God. And then, with the Renaissance, it swung back again, this time with a vengeance, toward pure, hard science.
Now, this scientific revolution was amazing for sure, but it also sent us down this very, very narrow path. We started looking at the human body less like a complex person and more like just a machine.
And, new technology completely changed the game. For the first time ever, with tools like the microscope, doctors could literally see the enemy inside the body, the damaged cells, the invading bacteria. So naturally, the focus shifted entirely to what you could physically see and measure. Everything else, your thoughts, your feelings, that was just dismissed as old-fashioned superstition. And all of this gave rise to what we now call the biomedical model. And for the last 300 years, this has been the undisputed king of medicine. The main idea is simple. Every single illness, from the sniffles to something life-threatening, can be boiled down to a problem with the body's machinery, a broken part that needs fixing.
But here's the real kicker. This model made a very deliberate choice. It totally separated the mind from the body. It basically built a wall between them. Your thoughts, your stress levels, your social life, your anxieties. According to this way of thinking, all of that was completely and totally irrelevant to what was making you physically sick.
But here's the thing about a model that simple. It couldn't explain everything. There were too many weird cases, too many exceptions. And slowly but surely, cracks started to show. The mind, which had been basically kicked out of the hospital for centuries, was about to make a huge comeback.
And you know where the first real challenge came from? Of all places, psychology. Sigmund Freud came along with this pretty wild idea he called conversion hysteria. He suggested that our deep, unconscious mental conflicts could literally convert themselves into real, physical symptoms, like paralysis or blindness. All of a sudden, the idea that our minds could physically impact our bodies was back on the table.
This opened the floodgates for a whole new field, psychosomatic medicine. Pioneers like Dunbar and Alexander started trying to connect specific personality types to specific diseases. They even came up with this idea of an ulcer-prone personality, someone whose repressed need for love and dependency created so much unconscious anxiety that it physically wore away at their stomach lining. Now, were they 100% right? No, we know now it's more complicated. But the crucial step was reestablishing that fundamental link. What happens in your head takes a very real toll on your body.
So you had the old guard, the purely physical model on one side. And on the other, you had these new emerging ideas about the power of the mind. The next logical step was to try and put it all together, to build a more complete and, frankly, a more accurate picture of health.
And that brings us to the hero of our story, the biopsychosocial model. This is the modern view, and it's a total game changer. It says you simply cannot understand health or illness by looking at just one piece of the puzzle. It's always a result of the constant back and forth between our biology, our psychology, and our social world.
I mean, just look at the difference when you put them side by side. The old model only saw physical causes. The new one, it sees biological, psychological, and social factors all woven together. Where the mind was once considered totally irrelevant, it's now seen as an absolutely essential part of the picture. So treatment isn't just about zapping a disease anymore. It's about helping a whole person achieve overall well-being.
Okay, this all sounds really great in a textbook, right? But does it actually work in the real world? Well, let's turn into detectives for a minute and look at a terrifying medical mystery that the old biomedical model was completely stumped by, but the new one solved.
So picture this. It's the 1970s, and the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, is facing this bizarre and terrifying problem. Groups of Southeast Asian male refugees who were perfectly healthy were suddenly dying in their sleep. No warning, no signs of struggle, and the autopsies? They found nothing. How on earth could this be happening?
All right, here's the first clue in the case file. This was the biological piece. Researchers eventually discovered that a lot of the victims shared a rare genetic defect that affected the heart's electrical system, its natural pacemaker. This was a critical clue. It was a vulnerability. But it wasn't the smoking gun, because tons of people live their whole lives with genetic risks that never cause a problem. Something else had to be pulling the trigger.
Okay, clue number 2, the psychological piece. The few men who were resuscitated all told stories of experiencing absolutely horrifying night terrors. One man vividly described a big black dog sitting on his chest, suffocating him. Now here's the crucial part. In Haman culture, where many of the victims came from, dreams aren't just dreams. They are taken very seriously as prophecies. So a nightmare like that wasn't just scary. It was seen as a vision of your own death, which, as you can imagine, would trigger an unbelievable amount of anxiety and physical stress.
And that brings us to the final clue, the social piece. You have to remember, these men were under an immense amount of strain. They were refugees trying to build a new life in America. They were dealing with language barriers, culture shock, and the huge pressure of finding work to support their families. Many were just chronically exhausted. This immense, ongoing stress was the constant backdrop to their lives.
See? No single one of these factors was the killer. The old biomedical model failed because it was wearing blinders. It could only see the biology. It took the biopsychosocial model to finally crack the case. You needed all three pieces. The biological vulnerability, that genetic heart condition. You needed the psychological trigger, the terrifying nightmare. And you needed the chronic social stress of their life as a refugee. The combination of all three created the absolute perfect storm that could literally stop a healthy man's heart.
So this is way more than just a fascinating, spooky detective story. Understanding this new model should completely change how you and I think about our own health every single day.
And really, this is the big idea I want you to walk away with. Health isn't just the absence of germs. It's not something that you can just take for granted until it breaks down. It's an active process. It's something you have to achieve by paying attention to all three parts of your life: your biological needs, your psychological state, and your social connections.
So, I'll leave you with this to chew on. The next time you feel that wave of stress or anxiety wash over you, just remember the story of the pendulum and the nightmare deaths. Ask yourself, is this feeling really just in my head? Or, as we've seen today, is it having a very real, very physical conversation with your body too?